This is the Inquisitive Minds Podcast.
I'm your host, as usual, Johnny Smith. With me, my guest today, he is the owner of the Erie Movie House. He is a volunteer veterinary technician assistant at the Erie Animal Network, and he has been a programmer with some very interesting things for over 40 years. Welcome to the program, Craig Stadler. Welcome.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, how you
Thanks
doing, brother?
too. I'm good. It's the beginning of the week, just getting kind of warmed up, I guess. How about you?
Same. I'm actually taking a rare day off today.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to do this then.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. I had to reschedule yesterday. I was with children.
Always important though. Yeah, good stuff.
So Craig, I know you from performing at your venue and through Dan Brady. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started and all that?
I guess I'll condense it down, but I started as a programmer when I was about 10 years old, which is about 41 years ago at this point in the early 80s. Got started with programming the Atari and the Apple and those really early computers, that kind of stuff. Saw the movie Tron when that came out. It was a huge life-changing experience for me, and I decided, that was it. I was going to be a programmer no matter what, kind of thing. I had no idea whether it was going to turn out the way that it did or not, money-wise or opportunity-wise or anything like that. It was just something I fell into, was passionate about. Kind of like you hear about, musicians and artists and things like that. They just find their calling or whatever it is. Maybe, could be comedy, could be anything.
You're just in on the ground floor there too. You said you were 10, and that stuff was really early on.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of kids didn't even have computers and that kind of thing, and their PCs were pretty new at that point. So, but yeah, totally fell into it and loved it, and started programming. And then by the time I was, I think, about 15 or so, I started getting published from writing code and sending them into magazines, because these guys, who are much older than me, who were writing code in these magazines back then, were like rock stars to me. They're like movie stars.
Okay, I'm gonna have to slow you down, because I'm a little out of my element.
All right.
I don't quite understand what you mean by writing code and sending it to magazines.
Sure. Okay. So when you think about an app nowadays, the code creates that app.
Oh, so you were creating early
programs
and sending it in to people.
Right. And back in the day, magazines, obviously a long time ago, they would accept, offers of people that would write a program, write an article around it about what it does and how they went through writing it, send it in, and they would get paid for that. And so I was reading those articles and typing in that code and that kind of stuff at the age of probably 12 or so, I want to say. And it was my thought or aspiration at that point, being like, wow, these guys are amazing. I'm going to be in this magazine one day, and that kind of thing, because it was one-man shows for the most part back then. It wasn't like now where you have entire teams making an app or entire team making a game. It was one guy, even, the Atari games and all that kind of stuff. And oftentimes these guys were featured as, a movie star, a rock star, and their picture was on the back of the box and stuff.
So you were so young when you were doing this. Is it self-taught? Where did you learn to do it?
For the most part, it was through the magazines. And then oddly enough, I learned my first programming language, which is called BASIC, which is the most basic one that you can learn back then. And then I asked a bunch of friends and stuff, what's the most difficult language to learn? Because I figured if I went to the easiest one to the most difficult, anything would be okay in between. So I figured I would challenge myself. And they said, well, assembly language is the most difficult, because you've probably seen patterns of zeros and ones, binary, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Assembly language is just outside of that. So it's not quite binary, but it's very, very close, which is incredibly cryptic to most people. And so I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go to the library and see if I can get a book on how to learn this, because if I can tackle that, like the most difficult language ever at 12 or 13, anything else will be easy.
First off, I want to say, as a young man, you had such vision, and it sounds like motivation. It's beautiful, but don't let me interrupt you.
No, that's fine. And so I went to the library. I found, believe it or not, a children's book on assembly language. I can't believe anyone wrote this back in the 80s, but it was essentially, little cartoons and building blocks to help you understand how the computer actually processes information, how to tell it commands and do things. in a very, very complicated language. So that was my second language that I learned, was assembly language, which is, anyone will tell you the most difficult language to learn, because it's, like I said, it's incredibly cryptic. It's similar to, like, if I said to you, bake me a cake, and you went and bought a Betty Crocker mix. That's one thing. That's real easy to do.
Yeah.
But if I said, okay, now make me a cake, but you have to go out and grow everything with seeds. You have to plant your sugar. You have to, grow your everything from the ground up. Very, very, very granular, basic elements. You'd be like, whoa, I don't even know how to, nurture these plants or grow them or keep, animals from eating them. There's so much to learn here.
I'd be like, we got to talk about budget, because
anyway,
this is going to take a lot longer.
No. I'll definitely fast forward. So so I had that aspiration essentially to start to be a programmer. Tron blew my mind. Got into programming from finding a library book, so on and so forth.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
And don't feel rushed. I'm not rushing you.
Yeah.
If that's what you feel, because this is very fascinating to me. So you got this children's book, and then how long did it take you to learn that difficult language?
I would say about a year.
Okay.
Yeah, because my goal is to take that language, learn how to do it, write code, write an article, and get published in that magazine. There was actually 2 magazines I wanted.
You had these magazines that you were reading, but did you have anyone close to you? Did you have any friends that were involved in this, or is this?
No, it was all pretty much solo, and I read everything through the magazines and that kind of thing. I did go to, actually, an older gentleman actually took me to what was called a users group back then, for people that used a similar computer. So they had
today that's something group. Completely different.
Yeah, well, we have meetups now for.
I've been to a few. I've been to a few things called users groups. I'm saying.
Okay.
There we go. It's an NA joke, guys. Sorry, guys.
Oh, okay, no problem. Yeah. So so now they're referred to as meetups, essentially, for people that are into the same topic or sport or whatever. So he did take me to those, and I did have some fostering from older folks that were very encouraging, but none of them were actual programmers. They were all pirate software and share games and that kind of thing. So there was a little bit of that to that credit, and my parents did definitely encourage me. It's just that they didn't really understand what the hell I was doing, obviously, and that's fine. It makes total sense. So so the years go by. I get better and better at being a programmer. By the time I want to say 15, I got into that magazine, and I believe 2 more. And it wasn't really even about the money. It was just about accomplishing something. And now that I look back, I'm like, damn, that was pretty crazy to want to do that at like 13.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And so I did that, ended up, working a few programmer jobs, that kind of thing, moved out to Georgia. I went to Georgia State for 3.5 years, I guess. I ended up dropping out because it just wasn't for me.
About what year was this?
I ended up leaving in 1995.
Okay.
So yeah, could have been 4 years, but anyways, did not finish. But I did work at the computer center, which was incredibly amazing to me, because I got to be around other computer people, programmers, that kind of thing, and help people at the university. And then I got to teach classes, non-credited classes. So in 1991 or 92, maybe 92, I was teaching Introduction to the Internet before the web existed. There was no World Wide Web at that point. And so I was teaching how to do all this crazy technical stuff to graduate students to do research. So that was really awesome that I got to be a part of witnessing like the birth of the web, at that point. Anyways, ended up leaving, got a job as a nuclear software engineer after that. And I wasn't intending.
Quick question about the internet itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I'm breezing through.
So the internet came out, or like for public, came out around like the mid 90s, early 90s?
Well, for the public with dial-up and stuff like that, I would probably fathom, it could have even been early 90s, because you had CompuServe before AOL and Prodigy maybe before AOL. But yeah, probably it's 90s, definitely.
Well, what was the precursor to that? Because there had to be something before the public got to it.
There definitely was. Yeah, well, there definitely was. I mean, it wasn't the internet itself, but people had these things called BBSs, and you would dial in with a phone modem. And so you were effectively using the phone instead of the internet connection to connect to another computer, with the same kind of reasoning involved. You're connecting to another resource to chat with people like we do now. We have IM, all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then there were message boards where people could leave stuff by topic. We have message boards now and forums now. Those existed back then. So when I was, 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth, I was dialing into these BBSs and reading stuff and talking to people and that kind of thing. So that was before the internet, without a doubt, public access.
Is that like the ham radio version of the internet?
Possibly, yeah. Different communication, different, yeah.
That's pretty cool, man. I
Yeah.
had no idea. Now, was there also like the government applications? Like who created this thing?
I believe it was in the 60s that the internet was actually created. And then, of course, educational institutions in the government had first access to that, first and foremost universities, because it was, I believe it was created by someone within that infrastructure. I could be wrong. And then, as they kept developing things, then the universities adopted it a lot more, and then people developed things for universities. And then the web came out, and then that's when it kind of really went, rubber to the road to the public, which would be the 90s. Yeah.
Man, I remember the first time they gave us in school, they taught us how to do an email and gave us an email. It was like 1997, I want to say. And it was the
Okay.
most complicated thing in the goddamn world to me.
Thankfully, things have gotten simpler. So yeah, you're right.
Back to your story though.
No, it's fine. So yeah, it's basically the first, I don't want to say real job I had, but the first real programming job that I had back in that time, which, I would say the 90s, everything was incredibly still conservative when it came to, you have a white shirt or a blue shirt, no stripes, a very IBM kind of like.
Okay.
And I was in Georgia, and Georgia was conservative at that point, Now Silicon Valley, way different. They were way ahead of that, shorts and flip-flops and all that. That was, no problem. Thankful to, some of those companies like Apple and whatnot that adopted all that stuff in the early days. But in my case, being a programmer, dropping out of college, not having a college degree, which was kind of not a good thing, trying to get an actual programming job. I found something in the newspaper that was for a programmer at this company that designed and built hardware for nuclear power plants and things like that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go for broke. I don't care if I get this job or not. Hopefully they'll see all the work that I've done all the way back to when I was, 10 or 11 years old. So at that point, I'm guessing I was about 23. I mean, that's a pretty good solid record of, being published and all kinds of stuff like that. So my hope was that the person I was interviewing with would see me, as a very, dedicated and driven person, and not necessarily the piece of paper.
Now, the job itself, was it just a job you wanted because of the money, or were you actually interested in what you were doing there?
Well, it was definitely, first and foremost, I wanted a legitimate programmer job full time. And I figured if I could get one, I could get more. Before that, I had gotten a few jobs as IT support, crawling under desks, running wires, which was great because I got to learn all this stuff about networking. And so now I'm more of a rounded, individual for that aspect. So I got to learn more about all these things without being a programmer and do my programming on the side. But I just wanted to get my foot in the door so I could get more of those jobs. And I said, no more support jobs, no more IT stuff. I don't care how long it takes. And so went into this job, did the interview. I thought it went incredibly well. And then the hiring manager, the person I talked to, said, well, it's a difficult decision because you're up against a guy who just graduated from MIT, but he has no experience. And I was thinking, oh God, like they're going to take this guy from MIT. I mean, this is a scientific company. He already has all the background of, not necessarily the nuclear industry, but, that kind of thing. And they called me back a few days later and said the job was mine. I was like, yes, in your face.
Congrats, man. That's such an inspiring story. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, what was the actual job? You said designing parts for a nuclear, what now?
So the company itself, they created hardware essentially for nuclear power plants and for radiation detection. They could even be used on the field for the military and things like that. And so I was in charge of writing the software that when these things were running would transmit their data back to the computer. And I made the thing so the person in the control tower could watch this thing to know if anything was out of whack.
Okay.
So if there's too much radiation in this spot, or this worker is getting too much dosage, or, there's a lot of things involved there. So I wrote the software, not from the ground up, but developed it so that it worked better to keep things within safety regulations.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long did you stay at this position?
I want to say I was there for like between 2 and 3 years from what I remember.
Okay.
And then a lot of crap storm kind of life things just happened all at once. My father passed away. My band that I was in, that was doing incredibly well, just everybody kind of went their separate ways, which totally is understandable.
Let's touch on that for a second.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were a musician.
Oh, yeah. I've been a drummer for about 25 years now.
Okay. Now,
death metal and grindcore and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
You can't just skip past that, man. Where did that start?
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah, we want the full
All right. So
picture of you, brother.
in the midst of me, whatever, pursuing programming and all this stuff that I'm talking about, this is a really fun story. So before that, I had played a little bit of bass in a punk band, just casually, never really serious about it, when I was like 17 or so. Here, push forward to about 23 or 24, I had heard about this new form of metal called death metal, which I didn't know what it was. I mean, I knew about thrash, like Slayer and Sepultura was my favorite, stuff like that. And this would have been late 80s, early 90s. But I was always looking for the next, like, wow, this is crazy fast or whatever,
Yeah.
It's just you one up, kind of like people do with horror movies or whatever. And so I was like, okay, I want to check this out, see what this is all about. And in Atlanta, there was a venue called, and it still is, I believe, called the Masquerade. And every Sunday they had something called Death Metal Sunday because it was getting so big, the style, at that point, just brand new to everybody. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to go and check this out. So
Craig,
I went.
I'm still devastated. You were going to skim over the fact that you were in a musical hub of a city and watched the birth of music. Keep going.
Well, I never know what people are going to be particularly interested, so I'm going to let you, drive the boat. So anyway, so I go to this show. I walk in and, waiting for the band, whatever, not paying attention to anything, who's playing, whatever kind of thing. First band starts playing, and I'm like completely floored, blown away. Like, what is happening right now? I look over to my right, and there was a kid that looked to be maybe, 13 years old, maybe, and he was fist banging and screaming every single word. I was like, I don't know if I can. Am I allowed to swear here?
Yeah, say yes.
I looked at this kid and I was like, holy shit. I was like, not only was I so moved by this experience, first and foremost, because I was there alone, but I looked over and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I want to do that. Like, I want to play that stuff, but I want to make people feel like that. Like, that is amazing. Like, that anyone could, make someone feel so like energetic and passionate and like openly emotional. I was like, hell yeah. I was like, that is absolutely what I want to do. And I think it was less than 2 weeks later, I went out and bought a drum kit, and it was Cannibal Corpse.
Okay.
I saw them in like 1992, 93. So it was like their second album, maybe.
Okay.
Second or third album, very early on. And I had no idea who they were. I was just like, oh my God, these guys are awesome. And they're still
jamming out.
Yeah, still around. But yeah, it was not only being moved by that, but like the drummer was having so much fun, and like the crowd was enjoying it so much. I was like, I want to be a part of this,
Well, if you played bass, what made you switch to drums?
I started bass because I was hanging out with a couple of people, and they were like, hey, we lost our bass player. Why don't you just jump in? And I'm like, okay.
Peer pressure always leads to bass.
Yeah.
They never warn you about
the quick funny thing about that is they hand me a bass guitar, and I'm like, what do I do with this thing? And I remember calling my friend, the guitarist. I was like, this thing isn't making any different noises. It only makes 4 sounds. He's like, dude, you got to press your strings down like with your finger. I was like, oh, I had no idea. No one told me anything, and I didn't. So yes, ding. Yeah, but that was fun.
Okay, so when you got into the drums, where'd you learn?
Self-taught from listening to a lot of music. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Just from listening to it.
Yeah.
Now, are you able to read music as well?
I can. Yeah, I can't sight read, but if you gave me something, I could, slowly interpret it and figure it out. Yeah. Not really gotten into the, classically trained portion of that. I have gone back and done rudiments through the years and things like that, but it's a very physical,
Hey man, rock the fuck
experience.
Out. And
yeah.
Just so everyone knows, you say it's
Anyway.
a crazy physical experience. Craig, you said you're 51?
I am. Yeah. I turned 51 in November. Yeah.
He is in incredible shape, especially for a 51-year-old.
Thank you.
So let's get back. You were at that company for 2 or 3 years.
Right. And this crap storm happened. I told you, like, my band broke up, my father died, things weren't going too well in my relationship life, and I decided to end that just because I knew it was a better thing for me to move on. So there were a lot of life decisions that were like kind of forced on me and that I made myself. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, what do I do now? Kind of thing. And I was sitting at a Waffle House with my friend, and he was like, going through his own stuff. And we were in our, I don't know, mid-late 20s, 25, 26, whatever it was. And he jokingly said, and I didn't know he was joking, he's like, screw this, let's move to California. And I said to him, I was like, okay, that sounds amazing. And I didn't even know like the .com thing had just started. Right. And so I'm sending these resumes out to California, trying to get something, ideally in the Bay Area, which is where I wanted to go. I talked to everybody. They said San Diego, LA, or Bay Area, but the Bay Area, obviously, for programmers. And sent resumes out, and these companies were actually paying to fly me out for the interview.
Oh,
unheard of. Like, the money was just crazy back
so
then.
it was
the stuff
just
that I ended
luck
up seeing.
that you were a programmer and you wanted to go to California while the .com boom was happening.
Starting, essentially, yeah.
Okay.
So this would have been 90, 97, 96, 97, I'm guessing.
Okay, yeah, so very early on.
Very early, yeah, because it was before Google even started. Because I want to say they started in 98, if I'm correct.
So you're getting flown out to these interviews. Nice interviews. How many?
Well, I only scheduled 2 because I didn't know how much time that I had, and I wanted to spend some time just like driving around and just seeing what it was like. So I'm telling my friend, I got these, interviews scheduled, and he's like, dude, I was just kidding, man. I'm not going. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going by myself then. But it added to the experience, I think, for me. Not that it would have been not as good with someone there by my side, a good friend, but having to forge through something like a lot of difficult life experiences, feet to the fire, can sometimes be good for someone to build, you know what I mean? Self-esteem and character and fortitude, and all that kind of stuff. You sink or swim, man. And so the experience ended up being pretty amazing. So I went out there on my own, did the 2 interviews. The one interview that I did, it was for a payroll processing company, which I wasn't too stoked about, but they said, you're going to basically be in charge of creating any kind of program that anyone in this company needs. I think they have 800 people, and maybe somebody will need you to make this or make that or whatever. They're going to come to you. You're going to be the only guy doing this in the IT department as a custom programmer, and you're going to build things for this company inside the company for what anybody needs. So it'll always change. And I was like, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to do data entry or something. And they said, here's the deal. We're going to find you a place to live. We're going to hook you up. We're going to pay to have all your stuff moved. We're going to pay the movers and everything. And we're going to give you a 5-figure bonus just for signing right now. And I was like, hell yeah. I was like, I'm good. Let's go. Like,
jackpot.
Yeah. Well, and then the odd thing, when I got back, I went to work and they called a meeting and saying to say that essentially the company, because they went a different direction, because I was going to have to tell them that I was quitting. Which I didn't want to do because I love my job there, but they were laying all these people off and I was on the list. So I was like, okay, I mean, I already got another job lined up. So I got a really nice severance package from them.
Oh, so things really worked out then.
Oh, it was unbelievable. It couldn't have been any better. I mean, I felt terrible for the people that were sitting at that table that, had been there 10 plus years and maybe didn't know what they were going to do for their next job. So it was a mixed bag for me. I was super sad for them. But for me, I was like, hell yeah. Like the ship came in,
What an off the cuff remark in a Waffle House would lead to such success.
Right. Or those, just those, I want to say just like luck, random details. Who knows?
Circumstances.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So, so how is this job? You get here. How do you like it?
So, so that's just, we're getting into the crux of it. So basically came out to California. All my stuff was being moved. So I had roughly I don't know, 3 weeks or something, maybe in that scope, that I had no furniture, nothing, empty apartment. But thankfully I was walking distance to my work. So, I got through it, waited for my stuff. And I realized really quickly, and this is getting into kind of a major part of a thing that changed in my life, that cube life just wasn't for me. Kind of thing. Okay. So I got there, was working, the pay was really good, the people were really friendly, I was very appreciated. But at the end of the day, when I got out of that cube and went home, I just wanted to fall over and die, kind of thing.
Oh,
it
man,
was exhausting.
I love it. This is where I get excited, because I have so many people on this program that are self-made, self-motivated, and it's just this type of thought right here, working a 9 to 5 or working for someone else is just death for me. Yeah.
I mean, I can certainly understand those details, for other people. And I don't know about the necessarily working for somebody else, but for me, it was that cube, that effing cube, dude. It was just and not only that, and I'm certainly not trying to be negative or derogatory toward the office culture or that kind of thing, but it was every Monday. It was just the same old conversations about, how did you actually, live for 2 days?
Yeah.
real life stuff, and I'm like, there's got to be more than that, man. Like this is
Like
just
Office Space
craziness.
almost.
Yes. Well, yeah, when that came out, it was amazing how much I connected with that. And I'm sure there was some experience, in writing that. But anyway, so I said, okay, I so appreciate these people for giving me this opportunity. I'm not just going to up and leave because I wasn't under an employment contract, but I'll stick this out. And while I stick this out, there's one thing that I've always wanted to do, because in the movie Tron, the Jeff Bridges, who was a programmer, basically was at this company and created a whole bunch of his own games, like while he was there, so he could make his own company and leave or whatever. And then those games got stolen and so on and so forth. In my idea, I always wanted to make my own company and write my own software and become independent from having to, like you said, work for somebody else or having certain restrictions on my 9-to-5 existence kind of thing in a way. Yeah. I hope I never step in a cube again for the rest of my life.
Think outside the box.
Anyway, so I came up with a few ideas, and this is essentially 1997. Wrote a couple of pieces of software, and the way that I did that was I would actually, do it after hours, kind of thing. So yeah, I would bite my time, but then I would spend my time from 5 o'clock until like 3 a.m, just burning it, like at home. So I was kind of working two full-time jobs. And then, so I did that for a while, started doing that, came out with 2 software products and started selling them.
Real quick,
And it went okay.
Before we figure out what they are,
Yeah.
When it comes to writing a program, you just explained long hours. What's the process of that?
Well, I think it really,
without going crazy.
Sure. Now there are what are called like framework libraries, which are kind of like, we talked about the Betty Crocker analogy, which means you want to make a cake, you get one of this, one of that, bam, you slap them together, mix them the right way, and you got a cake, right?
Yeah.
It's very much the same way now, that all this code development has been going on for so many years and evolved with so many engineers, and that now people have built these like kind of free libraries. So it's kind of like, if you wanted to build a car, you go out and you buy the tire, you buy the rim, maybe you buy the whole engine already built. Sure, you have to put them together, but it's not like really making a car from the ground up and welding and all that stuff. So that's how programming has become much easier, is through these libraries and framework libraries that are available, even for web pages and Wix and stuff like that. These things are all ready to go. You just snap them into place, upload your images, and bam, that kind of thing. It wasn't quite so easy back then in the late 90s. There was less available libraries, less available resources. I ended up using some like Microsoft products like to make these things, and then just baby steps, I got to figure out how to do this now, how to do this. And then you look back and you're like, holy shit, like I can't believe I did all that, because if somebody had told me how to do that in the beginning, I might not have even tried.
Right on. So
right.
What were the programs you came up with?
Okay, so the first one had to do with, and these are trivial at this point, obviously, getting access to what's called Usenet, which is a message board that existed before the web. So you could go on these things and look for images and MP3s and stuff like that. It made it really easy on Windows to navigate that, because you made a point earlier that like sometimes in those earlier days, things aren't so easy to navigate. And that's why AOL did really well, because they made it easy to go through their interface and access email and all these other things with just a couple of clicks. And that's always been something that sold really well to customers, is if you simplify something that there's a barrier to it being intimidating or confusing, you can win over a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Right. And so that was my idea with the Usenet thing. And the first 2 products were a little bit technical. The second one had to do with downloading all the elements of a web page. So you could navigate to a web page and you could pick and choose and download all the stuff to your hard drive. So you could go to a web page and you could say, hey, I want these images and these MP3s, and you hit a button and it downloads all of them. Whereas sometimes you have to go and like right click and save as, and it's a huge pain in the ass and you can't find the images. So this was like a tool for people to download stuff off the internet, download stuff off of web pages. They were doing okay. And then I started to see Real Player and Windows Media and QuickTime that were coming out with TV stations that you could watch on your computer through these software apps back then. This would be like 98, I'm guessing, or 99. And so I was finding a few random stations here and there, and I'm like, why is there no like master listing or piece of software that I can just pull up all the channels, scroll through them, pick the one I want to watch, and watch TV on my computer? And so I thought, well, I should make this. So I started doing research gathering channels together and writing something to go and find the channels. And then I wrote an interface, and the program was actually called CTube, and it was computer and tube, because my parents and grandparents would say, "Stop watching the tube."
Okay.
You know, and this is before anybody started using the tube term, because back then everything was like my this and my that and I this and e that, and you know, there and stir, like Friendster and Finester and all these other stirs. So people latch on to these things, and now there's a million like tube things, obviously.
Yes.
And obviously YouTube, but there's a lot of other ones. So found a unique name, which you have to do on the internet, and it's more difficult now than it was back then. And basically came up with this concept. And you can go and find it on the Internet Archive kind of thing. I'll send you a link to it later so you can check it out. But it was fun. So I created this software to watch TV on your computer, watch streaming television. It did pretty well in the beginning. And then really quickly, a couple of these larger groups contacted me and they said, "Hey, we can get you on the front page of Netscape for 2 weeks to see how it goes. And you can just give us whatever it was, 5% or 10%. It absolutely took off at that point.
Oh, really?
It was absolutely crazy. I want to say, and it was $24 a piece of for the copy of software. So it wasn't much money, but you sell enough of those and it adds up. And I want to say in 2 weeks, we sold about $12,000 worth of.
Oh, that's impressive.
Yeah, in like 2 weeks. So I was like, whoa, okay, this is great. Like, you know, and obviously everything in my life otherwise was good too. So it was a really nice time. My younger brother, who wanted to visit me from Erie, who was trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life, maybe he wanted to be a programmer. I said, you know what? Why don't you come out here? You have a Mac, make a Mac version of the software, and I'll give you 50% of whatever it makes.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
So I figured, like, I could be a good brother, take him in. He could live in California in the Bay Area, learn a skill, like, you know, with his own merit kind of thing, and then be rewarded for it. I joke around and say I kind of regret that decision because I was writing him checks for like $2,000 like every week. It was absolutely crazy.
Oh, that's great.
I mean, great for him though, because it took him, you know,
yeah,
several months working, you know, 12 hours a day plus, like getting books and figuring all this stuff out. But he did it, you know, and he earned it. So that all started going was going exceptionally well at that point with the Mac version, which was called iTube, because everything, you know, Apple back then was I this or I that. Still is, obviously, iPhone. But then streaming services started to go to web pages.
So
with Flash and stuff.
While you're doing this with these programs and you're making money, are you still working your other job?
I had actually quit. By the time I put out CTube, I had quit my position that I had accepted getting there. And so what I decided was, it was this really weird gradual thing. So first I was like, all right, dude, no more cube jobs, period. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'll work a cube job, but only as like a really good hourly short duration. Okay, maybe I'll do that for like 2 weeks for somebody if the hourly is good, because then I know there's an end in sight and I'll get the fuck out, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So I did that for a little while, and I worked for a whole bunch of different companies like PowerBar and PacBell and PayPal and just whatever. They had short-term contracts. Come in and do this, come in and do that. So I worked as an independent contractor doing that for a little while. And then I got to the point, and this is shortly after that, I was like, okay, I don't think I can work in an office anymore. Like even that. So I was like, okay, forced telecommute, mandatory. And I knew my choices were limited, but by that time I had gotten into a skill that was in such demand that like they had no choice but to let me work at home. So I've been working, I want to say I've been working telecommute jobs since about 2001.
So you were way ahead of the COVID.
Absolutely, yes. And for totally different reasons. It was just mental health and comfort and all that kind of stuff, you know, just peace of mind, whatever. Yeah.
Okay. So this is what, 98, 99. And you said streaming services are coming in?
Yes. Well, streaming services, the .com boom is in full form and the bubble's about to burst. And this is early 2000s.
Okay.
I'm guessing. So the advent of CTube and iTube was around 99 or 2000, give or take. And so we're doing really well. Everything's awesome. Trying to figure out what to do next. And then things I can see the sales like start to tank. And I'm noticing there's a lot of online streaming services and stuff like that. Not like Spotify, but like YouTube was out then. And they're completely like killing it, you know, before Google actually even owned them. And that's why they got bought for, I don't know, whatever billion it was. But so I can see the writing's on the wall. Yeah, it was a cool novel too. We made some good money. I had some really good experiences in building a company. And a guy approached me from investor from Manhattan and said, I'm working on a video search engine. Do you want to join that kind of thing? I'll just buy your company.
Oh.
And it was already not doing like so hot anyways. And he knew like all the details. And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome, because
Yeah.
I love search engines and I'd love to learn more about them and be on a team to make one. And the desktop software thing was cool, but I think I'm done with that. And I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with my company.
Yeah.
So he bought it, and he didn't really do anything with it. It was just kind of an acquisition just so that it didn't exist anymore and it was his, whatever. Long story short with that was, he was making this search engine for finding videos, which is not really the most unique thing in the world back then. There was a lot of these things, but the engineer that was there, that was in charge of like the underbelly or the guts of this thing, taught me what it was to be like an actual search architect, which is design what makes the search engine work underneath when you type in your keywords, what makes it pick what it does. Some people call this an algorithm, some people call this, whatever, but it's basically making sure that the user, when it requests something, gets what they want back. I mean, a lot of people complain about this with shopping. They type in TV and they get TV remotes. I don't want a remote. I want an actual television, and the search architecture doesn't know the difference between the two or how to, sense that, kind of thing. Whatever. Type in shoes and you get shoelaces. I want shoes, So I learned what that was and became completely obsessed and fascinated with search engine architecture and creating search engines. And so I took over the position of the person that was doing that and learned how to do it along the way. And that's what I've essentially been doing ever since. And that leads into, the thing that you asked about initially, but I've been a search engine architect for, wow, 50, at least 15 plus.
Okay.
Maybe more than that. Maybe more than that at this point. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
15 plus years. Yeah.
Okay. Well, where did the move back to Erie come in?
So, okay, this would have been about 10 years ago. I'm guessing close to 10 years ago. Has to be close to 10. I was in the Bay Area. I was dating my girlfriend at the time in Los Angeles,
and you were pretty big distance. Working for this guy, the search engine?
No, I was not. That had ended, and I had started a couple of different things: a social network, search engine, and one other thing that searched for screen names for Skype and stuff like that, and also a contract position.
Okay.
Anyways, met her. We were dating and stuff. It got more serious, and then we decided, okay, let's see how this goes and make a more serious commitment, live together. And we came back to Erie a couple of different times. And that last time, 10 years ago or whatever, we were here for 2 weeks. And after less than a week, we were like, man, stuff is getting so expensive in the Bay Area. I was like, I telecommute, I can make the same money anywhere. My money would go twice as long here.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be with some of my family, and it's cheap, and the lake and Waldemere and just all this awesome stuff. Plus, I kind of like the snow. Maybe not as long as it goes on.
It's
right,
a very extreme, it's an extreme lake up there, man.
Yeah. So we're like, you know what? Let's give it a try. I mean, things are only getting more expensive in California, and this was 10 years ago. It was bad then. It's a million times worse now, obviously. But got out, maybe early, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I came here 10 years ago and continue to do contracting and that kind of stuff, all full remote. And then started the movie house 6 years ago.
How did that start?
We were driving past an abandoned movie theater. It was down the street. And I love old nostalgia, especially, because it's in my time period, the 80s, when I was a preteen and teenager. Everybody has their kind of thing that, just clicks for them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it for me. And I was like, wow, that'd be really awesome if I could put like arcade games in here and decorate like old stuff, just to kind of bring people back and make them feel, warm and at home again and that kind of thing. And she's like, yeah, I'm really into movies, and I could pick movies that are a bit more obscure or strange. And I was like, this sounds cool. We should totally do this together. And we looked into it, and it was way too expensive. The rent was $10,000 a month, and we had to do all the furnishing. And I was like, we're not going to make that money back. Like, there's no way. So we were living in a building, here on Westlake Road, which is a few miles from there, still in the same area. And the people downstairs were moving out. We had lived here for a few years, and we couldn't find anywhere that had really high ceilings. Because I think if you have a huge screen that's like 9 feet tall, you got to have at least 10, 11, 12-foot ceilings, like to be able to put that in. And otherwise it'll be going to the floor and you can't really project on it. And then people will be looking, whatever. Anyways, Nicole had mentioned that there was really high ceilings. We went down there, the people were moving out. Sure enough, it was 11 or 12-foot ceilings and probably about 1,500 square feet. And I'm like, you know what? These people just completely recarpeted, repainted, put in AC. Everything's beautiful. All we have to do is move stuff in. We don't even have to build anything except for the screen. And so I went on eBay and Craigslist and sourced out, seats and, pinball machine, air hockey machine, just everything that I could find. So we could basically just pull all this stuff in and do a DIY and start it up. And we found a whole bunch of seats that were abandoned. They were either in Ohio or Pittsburgh. I can't remember, but they were basically just dumped in this guy's building when he bought the building. And he's like, just pay me $400 and take all you want. So we got like 50 seats. We had to clean them up and put them all back together, but they were real vintage, like 80s seats from a movie theater, which I really love too as well, that we could repurpose old, legit
absolutely.
seats. Because I've been to some indie theaters and they're like folding chairs or church pews. And I'm like, I love this place, but your seating sucks, man. Like,
we've all been to those places.
Right. I love them, but there's something to be said for that. So, and so it just built up, and another one of these games, another one of those.
So it's at the same location it's at now. This is the original location.
It is. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And that came like that because that's amazing.
Yes. Yeah. If you take everything out of it, that is pretty much, I haven't built any walls or, yeah.
For people that don't know, there's a theater in there. You said with what, 50 seats?
There is 30. We actually only put 30 in there. We could have put more in there, but I like leg room, like when you're moving in and out of the rows,
Yeah, there's a nice theater in there with 30 seats. It's actually rather large. There's like booth tables to sit at. There's all these vintage video games. There's a popcorn stand right there with a counter. Around back, there's a patio, a large backyard that we've had many stand-up shows at. Like, the place is phenomenal.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. I think my goal was to make people feel really welcomed and really at home and just really comfortable. And I know that's easy to say, but when I feel like I walk into it and I'm impressed by it and I'm like, man, this feels great. I love this place, kind of thing. I can't help it that's got to cross over to other people and maybe even in bigger ways. So that's more so my thing is, to provide and ideally, honestly, some kind of emotional nostalgic trigger kind of thing too as well, because I love that.
In there, it definitely takes you back.
Right.
Like, and every time I walk in, I'm blown away. But I remember the first time I kind of lost my shit a little bit. I was like, I saw a payphone and didn't know how to handle myself.
Right.
I was like, absolutely. Oh, a payphone. I grew up with those.
Right. Well, and that's the other element too, is we have a lot of kids parties, for birthdays and stuff. And these young ones have never even seen a payphone or a boombox or a jukebox or, a lot of the things that I've got set up in there. And I remember too, as well, this is why I really like this point. When I was really young, I remember my neighbors were a brother and sister, elderly couple. They had to be like well into their 80s, if not 90s at that point, but they would kind of babysit us and just show us around their house and stuff like that. And I was really young, like 4 something, 5, maybe probably 4. But man, big impression on me, like the brother, which I thought it was a grandpa, whatever, showed me like all these really cool, like, vintage antique radios and record players and just all kinds of stuff. And I was just like, wow. And I think, honestly, there was a part of me as a kid that was really moved by the fact that he was so, emotionally attached and moved by, and being able to share that, with a little kid. And so I definitely relate to that as well with our venue, being able to do that with a little kid too as well, knowing that there might be a possibility that,
honestly, like,
you know what I mean?
Even in the back, there's a Mario game set up. That takes me right back to my childhood.
Right.
So it's definitely amazing and it definitely works well. So tell me about your baby, your search engine idea you've been working on for a while here.
Yeah. So all of this pretty much led up to, I've always been doing one project or another on the side outside of my contract work, but you boil down 15 years of experience of creating search engines. And what happened was about 2.5 years ago, I started asking people, I did some research, to find out who's still out there. So if you consider the story of me seeing the birth of the web and all these companies coming and going, I just didn't pay attention for a lot of years of who was still around. I'm looking, and everywhere I go to search for videos on the internet, I'm getting YouTube. And I'm like, well, okay, YouTube's great and everything, but what about Vimeo and Veo and Dailymotion and Metacafe and Facebook videos and Twitter videos and Instagram videos? And I'm like, why am I not seeing any of these things? This is a video search engine, like video.google.com. I'm like, I know you guys own YouTube and everything, but I'm like, what about these other people? So I started thinking to myself, I'm going to talk to people. So I must have talked to at least 50 people saying, hey, do you use a video search engine? And 100%. No, I just go straight to YouTube because that's all they give me is YouTube anyways. All of them said that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you too. And so I start thinking to myself, well, I mean, that's amazing, but what about these other places? And if there are other places that still exist, there have to be newer ones. I don't know what they are. And if I don't know, definitely other people don't know. So I said, I'm going to make a video search engine that basically caters primarily to non-YouTube content. And I know that might be counterintuitive, but the thing is if you either are on YouTube and you can't find something, or you're not happy with them, or maybe you don't like them, or just there could be a lot of different reasons,
Yes.
Same thing as picking a consumer brand. I mean, maybe you don't like a certain brand of
Freedom of
toothpaste or
choice.
whatever.
Freedom of choice is always wonderful.
Simple stuff. Yeah. And I said, just that element alone will make this worth it. And so my initial goal was to find like 10 different sources for videos, and maybe, I don't know, 1 million or something videos, something like that. But what I found was, as I started to research to see, number one, who was still alive, and build, the interfaces to get that data into the search engine, I kept finding more and more of these things. And then I would find like a YouTube competitor in Indonesia and one in Japan. And I had no idea these things existed. So it's like the more I got down the rabbit hole, so to speak, the more I found out how much I didn't know. And I'm like, wow, I mean, this is great, because now I can build a product that'll highlight and give focus to this content that nobody knows even exists, which is really the point of the search engine itself, is to provide access to information. I mean, it's really basic stuff.
You started with a goal of finding 10. Do you remember the number, how many you found?
Well, by the end of 2 years, I found 70.
Oh, wow.
So there are officially about 70, well, give or take 70, other resources for videos other than YouTube, which completely blew my mind that there was even more than 10.
Yeah. And how many videos?
Right now, there's almost 700 million videos in our search engine.
And what's the search
engine?
Wow. Promo that.
Yes. Okay. So here's the wrap in, or the tie-in. So on the internet, a lot of things have been taken by certain names, whatever kind of thing, and they don't necessarily relate to what you're trying to do. You have to do your research. So just because you come out with a website or a domain name or whatever, somebody else might be using it, another product might be using it, you got to look. And then you have to come up with something unique enough that either a domain squatter, which is somebody who buys up domains and then tries to resell them at a higher price and kind of gouge, hasn't bought that name, which is difficult too. It's difficult to find something that's unique, that's not completely ridiculous, that people will never remember.
Yeah.
On top of that too, right? And
you don't want to have 69 in your name, like.
Yeah, or just it has to have a certain ring to it and have an identity. And anyways, so I spent a couple of days, it seems like. Couldn't find anything. Everything they came up with was like too silly, non-memorable, too complicated. Somebody had already used the domain. Maybe it's the name of a, I don't know, whatever, food or something. Could be anything. I was just out of resources. Yes, totally. And so I gave up, and I figured this is one of those times going through the creative process. I really think that there are points that you hit a wall and you have to kind of just like let it go, breathe, go do something else and relax. And then it'll come to you when you're not thinking. I really think that happens with a lot of people, artists and performers and stuff like that.
A lot of stuff comes to me in the shower.
I was just about to say that, like, totally. That is my jam. Whenever I'm in the middle of a really complicated problem, absolutely. And I've heard about this, and there's actually science behind this, because I read, like, why a shower?
Yeah.
It has to do with the fact that, like, your attention is actually taken to the warmth and the visceral feeling and being relaxed of the water. So it takes your brain somewhere else to allow that to be kind of processed in parallel. And that's how that happens.
Okay.
Because it's actually taking your attention away and allowing you to actually not focus on it.
You can relax
And
a little bit.
yeah, and there are other things that it can do the same thing. But that was always my thing when I had a really difficult problem. I'm like, all right, step back, screw this. I'm just going to go take a shower and forget about it for a while. Not even saying like I'm going to solve this there, but dude, 9 times out of 10, I'd be in the shower trying to just relax, figure it out later. And all of a sudden it just pops into my head and I'm like, damn, I wasn't even thinking about that. I wasn't even trying to solve it, So sure enough, that kind of thing happened. And I had done that, relaxed, came out, and Pete was sitting there, my cat. And Pete is named after the Nickelodeon show Pete and Pete, which were 2 redheaded
I remember Pete
boys.
And Pete.
Yeah. And so my girlfriend at the time had named him Pete. He's Ginger.
Danny Glover was
like,
one of the Petes.
What?
Not Danny Glover, that actor. Another. I thought it was Danny.
I'm not sure.
Danny something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hadn't even really watched it.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It was Danny something though.
So anyways, I was like, wait a minute. Everybody in the internet, well, you know what I mean? Most people love cats, and
yes,
people like mascots, and people like something that has some kind of identity that's not necessarily, you know what I mean? That's more playful, that
absolutely.
Kind of thing. So I said, okay, I'm going to call this Petey something, and vid is short for video. So I just looked up Petey Vid.
I'm sorry, Danny Tamborelli.
Okay. I'm not sure I know who that is.
That was one of the redheads.
Yeah.
That was Pete. I'm sorry. I just wanted to get that out properly. So
yeah. So Petey Vid, the name was born, and then I got essentially my friend to do kind of a comic book character version of him without it being, not too childlike and not too like menacing or serious. And he came up with a really great logo of Pete, and the search engine is Petey Vid, and it's modeled after essentially my cat going and finding you videos across 70 or so different sources.
Well, that's creative. Now, what is it, peteyvid.com or?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
peteyvid.com.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's interesting. Now, is it growing more? Like, is there a market for that? That's the wrong question. What I mean is, now that there's a search engine to find videos off of YouTube, have you found that people are producing more videos? Is that market growing now?
I think the resources are growing, and I think largely it's because of, I'm not saying this personally, but some people have expressed to me that they have been upset with YouTube's, lack of clarity on their terms of service. And as a result, people are getting, banned, their channels are getting banned, they're getting demonetized for very ambiguous reasons. A lot of these types of things, which might lead someone to be like, you know what, I don't want to use their stuff anymore. Now, granted, we don't host videos, we don't upload videos to Petey Vid, it's all from other sources. But if you're using that to do your video search, we would be a good alternative to that to find videos on other platforms if you're trying to find something that maybe you haven't found there, or to avoid them. And there could be a lot of different reasons. And sorry, go ahead.
Have you thought about adding that function, like how YouTube allows you to upload videos? Have you thought about adding that function?
I have, but there's kind of a barrier. I'm a one-man show, and there's only so much that I can do in a day on top of, all my other activities. And I think it also lends itself to the possibility of, I don't know, certain types of groups kind of skewing that, if they're attracted to that. Because if you think about, Facebook tries to do a really good job of like leveling things out. I know that they tend to be more on the liberal side of things, but take another social network, for example, that's very extreme on the other end, which is called Gab. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
I'm not familiar with them at all.
So Gab is very, very much extreme, questionable, content.
Racist.
Yes.
Say it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that most people would not, be interested in reading or participating in.
But they say it's free speech.
They do.
Okay.
Yes, and that is true. It is, but the group that it's attracted is
not an attractive group.
Well, I think it kind of ends up defining the product in a way.
Speaking of Facebook videos, I watched a video one night before going to bed of a guy repairing a cow's hoof. And 2 weeks later, I've seen so many videos, I'm pretty sure I can reshoe a horse.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Now, were they suggested to you after that? Is that
Yes, it was
Okay.
just after one after the other. And I'm just like, oh, this cow has an infection in his foot. We got to clean this out.
right?
I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
this,
that
this
can
shoe
be good
needs
or
replaced.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too, is Petey Vid does not use algorithms to track your search history, and it doesn't save any of that, and it doesn't sell any of your information. And the searches are not based on user activity, which means you got a guy over in Indonesia does a search and somebody in Japan and then me, we're all going to get the exact same results. It's not skewed or changed based on your locale or what you've searched before or what we think is going to be clicked on more or any of that kind of thing. Now, I understand why Google did those things, and they're probably making really good money right now. But that's not really the focus of, I'm not going to say I don't want to make any money. That's not what, a business is there for, but is to not make money. But my focus is to put out a good product that's appreciated by a certain demographic or a couple of different demographics. And we'll see how it goes. It grew for a while, and then it kind of stagnated, and then COVID hit, and then it had another growth spurt.
Okay.
So it's basically between, I want to say 150 and 200,000 a day. So
searches per day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is, it's decent. It's decent. It's not amazing, and it's making some money. It's not like phenomenal. But I've just engaged a PR agency as of last week to get some coverage on TV and podcasts and things like that. So we'll see, because I think the environment is ripe for people interested in what they perceive as, non-biased and
a lot of
uncensored
people
and things
a lot
like
of
that.
people feel
Yeah,
controlled right now.
absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I think they're looking for something that's, well, I think a lot of people are waking up and realizing what I realized 2.5 years ago, which is like the entire internet has collapsed down to just a couple of providers. Like, where is everybody else?
Yeah. No,
We need more than one kind of toothpaste, guys. Like,
absolutely. Absolutely. Freedom of choice, like, I guess it's part of United States are like, oh, we're free, we get to choose. It's nice to see someone bringing actively helping to bring some freedom of choice, even if it's on the internet.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing is, I joke around and say, one kind of toothpaste, but that's more so in what most people would observe at this point, because most people know, YouTube as a video source, and that's kind of it. But now there is more out there. Obviously, I found like 70 of them, but they don't know that,
the
a
only
lot of
place
new ones
that I usually go for videos outside of YouTube, and it's probably terrible, but it's like World Star Hip Hop.
Oh yeah.
Just because I enjoyed some of their content.
Yeah, that's similar to like Live Leak, and Live Leak is like that too, where they have people that are filming crazy stuff that's happening, off the cuff.
Like, I don't want to see hate crimes, but I'll watch a fist fight every now and then.
Or it's crazy, weird things happening
Car
in a store
accident,
or something.
This guy's tire flew off and crashed through a window. There's a snake loose at a bodega.
Right. Or even a cat sleeping on top of an ATM, like in a store or something, or just weird real life stuff that people are like, okay, this is fun. Yeah.
Craig, I want to ask you for a piece of advice for like someone out there who's interested in getting into programming, because you've done all your stuff self-motivated from the ground up. What would you say to someone young and out there interested in everything?
What I would say is that the time is better than it ever has been at this point. I think the biggest thing for me that I ended up learning kind of just on accident is to have a purpose to motivate you to do something. Okay, so for me, for example, I talked about like when I went in and accidentally saw that Cannibal Corpse show, and I was like, wow, I want to do that. Like, I want to make drums, I want to play drums like that, and more importantly, I want to make people feel like that, like watching that kid. So that's purpose. Like, that was purpose to me. And so wanting those two different things, I didn't even really have to think about, oh God, I got to go to lessons. It was more so focusing on the outcome and what it was that I really wanted. Right. And so with coding, what I would say is it's not necessarily about like, oh, I'm going to make 6 figures and blah, blah, blah. So what? I mean, this is my opinion, of course, but learning a new skill in pursuit of actually creating something that you know what it is that you want, I think is probably the bigger motivator.
That's awesome. I know a
Right?
lot of
Because the thing
people.
is, you can't just say, well, I'm going to be a programmer. Well, what do you want to make? Why do you want to do it? Like, having purpose drives motivation,
It's even like,
I
people
think.
want fame and they want fortune, but there's no vehicle to get that. Or what are you going to do to get fame? You know what I mean?
Right. Well,
I
and that
like,
bigger question, why too,
yeah. Why? Why do you want that?
Right.
No, I like it. Have a purpose with your life. You know what? And the purpose of this show, it's just to talk to so many interesting people, and you have definitely been one of them today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been nice.
Real quick before we get out here, please promo yourself. The Erie Movie House is available to rent out if it is, and go over your website again.
Yeah, so the venue itself is available for people to rent. What happens is you can just bring in whatever movie you want, and we provide the popcorn, and all the games and everything are free. And we have streaming too as well. Huge screen, 30 seats, nice PA sound, all that stuff. And it's eriemoviehouse.com, ERIEMOVIEHOUSE.com. Yeah. And then the video search engine obviously is Petey Vid, PETEYVID.com. And yeah, give it a try and see if you find anything interesting that maybe you haven't seen before. Or
Yeah,
hopefully
guys,
you will.
make sure you check that out. It's very interesting. I know Craig. He's a hell of a guy. You know what? I almost forgot. Cat Daddy. You just took in some foster cats. You told me.
I did, yeah. So I started volunteering for a local organization, cat shelter, Erie Animal Network, back in November, and I've been with them 4 days a week essentially since then. And I definitely care for them there, between 20 and 25 cats, that kind of thing. Everything from vet tech assistant to litter to meds, just all that stuff in between. But they're already brought in at that point, and recovering, and just nursing them back to health and making sure they're cared for and all that stuff, which is great, and I love it. But something came up, I don't know, just a few days ago, and they said, we have an emergency. We have these 4 kittens that are 8 weeks old, and we have no one that can foster them. All of our fosters are full. And I said, well, I have a huge front room. I work at home. This sounds amazing, and it sounds like it'd be a really nice experience, and I'm sure I'm probably going to want to do it again. But yes, I just got them 2 days ago, and they're really well. I'm having to just give them some medication for their deworming, but like they've totally warmed up in a really short time, which is amazing to see too, because when I first got them, and any noise would like freak them out, and they didn't really like people. But I'm making sure to make little trips in there just to get them comfortable and stuff. And now when I open the door, they all come up running to me. So it's and
that's
just
awesome.
like less than 2 days. So it's really wonderful to see. And yes,
Erie Animal Network. It's a great organization. Can you shout out their website real quick?
I'm pretty sure it's just erieanimalnetwork.com, and then there is actually facebook.com/Erie Animal Network. We obviously take donations. Everyone that works there is 100% volunteer and does not get paid. So all of our time is, just love and care, and, out of everybody's time just to volunteer for a really good cause and take care of the babies. So
that's beautiful.
yeah.
Well, Craig, thank you for coming on. Absolutely amazing. I genuinely appreciate you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Everybody out there, thank you for listening. Until next time, peace and love.
Bye-bye.